The night air over Iwo Jima carried the smell of burned metal and volcanic dust. It was February 21st, 1945, just after midnight. The island was shaking again, not from the ocean this time, but from engines, heavy, grinding engines pushing through the darkness. Somewhere beyond the shattered ridges, Japanese tank crews were preparing for something desperate. American Marines along the front line could hear it too. Low mechanical rumbling, tracks grinding against rock. The sound was slow at first, then louder. Something big was moving toward them in the dark, and among the Marines waiting in the black volcanic sand was one man holding a weapon that looked almost primitive beside artillery and tanks. A
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
flamethrower. Just one Marine, one tank assault coming toward him. And in a few minutes, everything would change. The sky above the island was dim with smoke, drifting from fires that had been burning for days. Ships from the U.S. Navy sat offshore like silent giants, their guns occasionally flashing as they fired into the hills. Even in the darkness, the island looked wounded. Craters covered the ground. Broken equipment lay scattered along the beaches, and the black volcanic sand, soft and loose like powdered coal, swallowed every step a Marine tried to take. You could almost feel the exhaustion in the air. For 3 days straight, men had been fighting, digging, shooting, and barely sleeping. Iwo Jima had already been burning for days. When U.S. Marines landed on February 19, 1945, they stepped into a battlefield unlike anything they had seen before. The island was small, only about 8 square miles. But every inch of it had been turned into a fortress. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, the Japanese commander, had spent months preparing. Instead of defending the beaches directly, he built a hidden network of tunnels, bunkers, and gun positions deep inside the volcanic rock. From the outside, the island looked quiet, but underground, thousands of soldiers waited. Kuribayashi understood something many commanders before him had ignored. Charging American forces on the beaches would only lead to quick destruction. Instead, he designed a defense based on patience. His soldiers would remain hidden while the Marines landed. Then they would strike from fortified positions once the beaches became crowded with men and equipment. His underground tunnels stretched for miles. Some bunkers were connected to several others. A gun destroyed in one opening could be rolled through a tunnel and fired again from another location minutes later. The Marines of the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions learned very quickly what that meant. The moment they moved inland, the island came alive. Machine guns opened from hidden slits. Mortars fell from unseen positions. Artillery fired from caves cut into the mountains. The black sand slowed every step. Tanks bogged down. Trucks struggled to move. And the Marines realized something else. The enemy was not charging them. The enemy was waiting. Every ridge had to be taken with careful movement. A hill that looked empty could suddenly erupt with gunfire from several directions. Many Japanese positions were built so low into the rock that only a narrow opening showed. Even naval bombardment could not destroy them completely. The Marines soon discovered the most effective weapon against these positions was the flamethrower. Flamethrower teams became essential to the battle. Each Marine carrying one wore a large metal fuel tank on his back, connected by a hose to a nozzle gun. The weapon fired thickened gasoline that burned intensely when ignited. In caves and bunkers where grenades could not reach, the flamethrower forced defenders out or burned the position entirely. But carrying one also made the Marine a clear target. The tanks on their backs could explode if hit. By February 21st, the fight had turned brutal and slow. Every bunker had to be destroyed one by one. Every cave had to be cleared by hand. Progress was measured in yards. Marines crawled forward across the volcanic ground under sniper fire. Engineers placed demolition charges at bunker entrances. Flamethrower teams followed close behind rifle squads. It was exhausting, dangerous work. But that night, something unusual was happening behind Japanese lines. Colonel Baron Takechi Nishi, commander of the Japanese 26th Tank Regiment, was preparing for a counterattack. Nishi was not an ordinary officer. Before the war, he had been an Olympic gold medalist in equestrian events. In 1932, he won gold in the Los Angeles Olympics. American newspapers had once praised him. He had even become friends with Hollywood actors during that visit. Now, 13 years later, he stood on a volcanic island surrounded by American Marines. Nishi commanded a small number of tanks remaining on Iwo Jima. Many had already been destroyed during naval bombardments or early fighting. Still, the Japanese command believed armor could help disrupt the Marine advance if used carefully. Tanks could provide mobile firepower where infantry alone might fail. His tanks were not modern by 1945 standards. Most were Type 97 Chiha medium tanks, lightly armored compared to American Shermans. The Chiha carried a 57mm gun in earlier models and a 47mm gun in later variants. Their armor was thin, sometimes only around 25mm thick. Against American anti-tank weapons, that was a serious weakness, but in darkness and rough terrain, they could still be dangerous. Kuribayashi had ordered that tanks be used carefully throughout the battle, often buried as stationary gun positions. But now, with the Marines pushing deeper into the island near Motoyama Airfield No. 1, Nishi prepared to move them. The idea was simple. Strike at night, surprise the Marines before dawn, use tanks and infantry together to break the American line and disrupt their advance toward the airfields. The tanks started moving after midnight. Engines roared softly as crews guided them through narrow paths carved between rocks and bomb craters. Headlights stayed off. Only dim red lamps inside the tanks gave light to the drivers and gunners. Japanese infantry moved beside them, carrying Arisaka rifles, grenades, and satchel charges. They hoped darkness would hide them. But the island itself betrayed the plan. American artillery observers had been watching the ridges all night. Naval guns from battleships offshore had been firing on suspected movement areas. The ground was already torn open by days of bombardment, and when those tanks started moving, the noise carried across the volcanic landscape. Marines heard it first as a vibration. Then came the sound, low rumbling, metallic clanking, tracks crushing rock. At a forward Marine position near the Motoyama airfield area, men from the 4th Marine Division froze in place. They listened. Someone whispered the word every infantryman feared at night: tanks. But there were no American tanks nearby to stop them immediately. Many Shermans had been pulled back for repairs or refueling. The frontline Marines were mostly infantry holding shallow defensive positions in the volcanic ground, and the darkness made everything worse. The men waited in shallow foxholes and behind broken rocks. The ground was still warm from earlier explosions. The sky above was dim with drifting smoke. You could almost feel the tension pressing down on every Marine there. Somewhere among those Marines was a flamethrower operator from the 4th Marine Division. Private First Class John "Red" Carter had already spent 2 days clearing caves on the island. Flamethrower teams were among the most dangerous jobs in the battle. The fuel tank on the Marine's back carried thickened gasoline. If a bullet hit it, the result could be catastrophic. But flamethrowers were also one of the few weapons that could force defenders out of deep bunkers. Carter was 22 years old. Like many Marines on Iwo Jima, he had never seen combat before February 19th. Now, in the darkness of February 21st, He was about to face something no flamethrower operator expected: tanks. The first Japanese tank appeared through the smoke around 2:30 a.m. At first it was only a shape moving through the haze. Then the silhouette became clearer, the rounded turret of a Type 97 tank. The long barrel of its gun pointed forward as it rolled toward Marine lines. Behind it came another, and another. Machine guns suddenly opened from the Japanese infantry moving beside the armor. Tracer rounds cut through the darkness. The Marine line exploded with return fire. Rifles cracked. Browning machine guns roared. Mortars began firing into the approaching shapes. But tanks kept moving. Bullets bounced off the armor. The grinding noise of tracks grew louder. One Marine later said the sound felt like a train coming through the battlefield. Some Marines reached for bazookas, but visibility was terrible. Smoke and darkness hid exact positions. Missiles streaked out but missed or struck rocks. The tanks kept pushing. One of them rolled straight toward Carter's position. From only 50 yards away, the massive shape looked even bigger. The turret slowly turned. Its machine gun opened fire. Sand and rock erupted around the Marine foxholes. Carter pressed himself against the ground. His flamethrower felt heavy on his back. The weapon was not designed to stop tanks. Its purpose was bunker clearing, close-range fire against openings. But the tank was coming closer. 30 yards, 20. The Marines around him were shouting warnings. Someone fired a bazooka from farther down the line. The rocket streaked across the darkness and exploded near the lead tank, but it hit at an angle. The armor held. The tank kept moving. Carter knew one thing about Japanese tanks. Their armor was thinner than American Shermans. But even thin armor was still armor. A flamethrower could not melt steel, but it could do something else. If he could reach the engine vents or the vision ports, the fire could blind the crew. The tank rolled closer, its tracks crushing broken volcanic rock. At 10 yards away, Carter made a decision that would sound impossible later. He stood up. The flamethrower nozzle came up in his hands. He stepped forward. The tank's machine gun fired again, bullets striking rocks around him. But in the darkness and confusion, the gunner did not see him clearly. Carter aimed at the rear vent area as the tank angled slightly while moving. Then he squeezed the trigger. A long stream of burning fuel shot into the night. The fire hit the back of the tank like a wave. Flames spread instantly across the engine deck. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the tank stopped. Inside the vehicle, the crew suddenly faced something terrifying. Flamethrower fuel burns extremely hot and sticks to surfaces. When it hits engine vents or air openings, smoke and fire can enter the vehicle. The tank's engine roared louder for a second. Then it stalled. The crew inside likely panicked. Hatches began to open. One Japanese tanker tried to climb out through the top hatch, but Marines were already firing. The man never made it out. The tank sat burning in the darkness. Behind it, the second tank slowed, trying to move around the wreck. Carter reloaded pressure into the flamethrower tank. Another burst of fire shot forward. This time the flames hit the front of the second tank, splashing across the vision slits. The crew suddenly lost visibility. The driver turned sharply to avoid the burning vehicle ahead. The tank slid sideways in the loose volcanic sand. A bazooka team finally got a clear shot. The rocket struck the tank's side armor. The explosion ripped through the hull. The night lit up for a second like lightning. Behind them, the rest of the Japanese assault began to collapse. Infantry scattered under Marine machine gun fire. Another tank tried to reverse but struck a crater and became stuck. American artillery observers quickly called in fire. Within minutes, shells began landing around the remaining vehicles. The counterattack was breaking apart. Colonel Nishi's armored push had run into something the Japanese planners had not expected: close defensive positions that refused to break. and one Marine with a flamethrower had just stopped the lead vehicle. The burning tank became a landmark in the darkness. Marines fired around it. Japanese infantry tried to regroup, but the element of surprise was gone. By 3 a.m., the attack was effectively finished. Several Japanese tanks were destroyed or disabled. The remaining ones withdrew back toward their lines. When dawn finally arrived over Iwo Jima, Marines could see the results clearly. Blackened tank hulls sat across the volcanic terrain. Burned tracks twisted across the sand. The lead tank Carter had hit was still smoking. The hatch remained open. Inside, the crew had never escaped. Marine officers walked through the area later that morning, examining the battlefield. The flamethrower burn marks across the engine deck told the story. Carter himself did not talk much about what happened. Most Marines didn't. By that point in the battle, every day on Iwo Jima brought moments just as intense. But that small action showed something important about the fight for the island. Iwo Jima was not a battlefield decided only by fleets or divisions. It was decided by individual moments. A Marine stepping forward with a flamethrower, a bazooka gunner waiting for the right shot, an artillery observer calling coordinates in the dark. Every small action shaped the larger battle. The fight continued for weeks after that night. Mount Suribachi would fall on February 23rd. The famous flag raising would become one of the most recognized images of the war. But even after that moment, the northern half of the island remained deadly. Japanese soldiers continued fighting from tunnels and caves. Colonel Nishi himself continued commanding what remained of his tank regiment. With most of his vehicles destroyed, many tank crews fought as infantry. Several accounts suggest that Nishi personally moved between defensive positions, encouraging his men to continue resisting as American forces pushed north toward Hill 382 and the rugged terrain beyond the airfields. His exact death is uncertain, but records indicate he was killed in action sometime in March 1945 as the American advance closed in. For the Marines, the battle lasted until March 26th. Nearly 7,000 Americans were killed. More than 19,000 were wounded. Almost the entire Japanese garrison, over 20,000 men, was killed. But the capture of Iwo Jima gave the United States something extremely valuable. The island became an emergency landing field for damaged B-29 bombers returning from missions over Japan. Long-range bombing missions from the Mariana Islands required B-29 crews to fly nearly 3,000 miles round-trip. If an aircraft was damaged by anti-aircraft fire or enemy fighters, returning to the Marianas could be impossible. Iwo Jima sat almost exactly halfway along that flight path. After the island was secured, American engineers quickly repaired the airfields. Within weeks, the first emergency landings began. By the end of the war, more than 2,400 B-29 bombers had landed safely on Iwo Jima. Historians estimate that these emergency landings saved the lives of more than 24,000 American airmen. Many of those crews later said the sight of Iwo Jima's runway appearing below their damaged aircraft felt like seeing land after being lost at sea. And somewhere in the long story of that brutal battle was a moment in the darkness of February 21st. The sound of tanks moving through volcanic rock, Marines waiting in silence, and one Marine stepping forward with a flamethrower as a tank rolled toward him. The Japanese tank crews had prepared for artillery. They had prepared for machine guns. They had prepared for bazookas. But in the confusion of a night assault on Iwo Jima, they never expected a single Marine to stand up in front of their lead vehicle and cover it in fire. On a battlefield filled with thousands of soldiers, sometimes the turning point came down to just one man and a few seconds of decision. And on that cold volcanic night in 1945, those seconds changed the entire assault.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.